Hello everybody and welcome to another Surge Online. Looking at myself, I look quite sunburned even though I'm not. I'm just pink for some reason. Hope you're all okay. We've got another good night for you tonight. We have Nathan coming up in a minute, talking about a guy from the Bible called Mordecai. But first up, we have the legend that is Beth taking on the biscuit challenge. So check it out.
Hi my little friends, I am back again with another, don't know what to call them. It's not really a challenge because it's online, so it's just me doing yet another stupid thing to myself in order to make you laugh. Not gonna lie, I am really running out of ideas, so I realised that I never did the biscuit challenge when all the other leaders did it, and so that's what I'm gonna do today, because if it hasn't escaped your notice, I have a very big forehead, so I think this is gonna come in handy. I've got my biscuits. I'm just trying to figure out how to get them on my head. What we're gonna do is does that work? That'll do. It's a wheelie chair and I'm rolling away. Right, here we go. Got a nice sturdy bed to balance my head on. There's my cat. He's probably gonna jump off in a minute when he sees what I'm about to do. How do I hold this and like put biscuits on my head? Okay, I've got the packet next to me. And we're just gonna hope for the best. I'm literally using my phone as a mirror. I can already feel them sliding down my forehead. Oh my gosh. The things I do for youth group. Come on, boys. We're on number 6. Okay, I can start to feel them tilt now. Okay. Oh gosh. It's like Jenga but with digestives. I'm trying not to laugh because it's making them wobble. This is amazing, I'm sick of this. I'm pretty sure I'm on 10. Thing is, I don't know what the latest number was. I swear down Charlotte got like 13. Guys, I found a new talent. I'm gonna ditch my English degree. Thing is, am I cheating because I'm holding my head up? Oh my gosh, I can feel it going. I can feel it going! I feel it going, I can feel it going! Okay, I don't actually know how many I got on my head, so I'm gonna edit this video now and count. See you next time!
Hi guys, hope you're all doing alright. So today guys, I'm going to talk to you for a short while about a man called Mordecai. Now some of you might know who he is, some of you might not, and he's a very interesting guy. Now some of you may remember, probably a few weeks, maybe a couple of months ago now, Beth spoke about the book of Esther, and Esther particularly. Now Mordecai is from the book of Esther, and I think Beth might have even mentioned him a couple of times when she was speaking. And I'm kind of carrying on a little bit from what Beth was saying to a certain degree. Now, obviously, Beth focused on Esther, the woman, obviously the whole book is kind of focused around. But I want to look at Mordecai, who is this guy who is the cousin of Esther, who essentially raised Esther. So Esther's parents died, and Mordecai raised Esther. And so we learn a little bit about him through the book of Esther. And so I want to focus a little bit about him and what he did and and I believe what we can learn from him as a person. And so Becca backstory, obviously, if you remember anything about what Bethan said, Esther essentially was obviously raised by Mordecai, who then went on to be the wife of the king of Persia, and then saved all the Jewish people when there was a grave threat where the Persians were trying to kill all the Jews. So that's a very, very basic background about Esther. And Mordecai comes into it, and once Esther had become queen of Persia and the wife of the king, Mordecai was just one of the sort of servant officials in the palace. And my story, or where I want to start with Mordecai, is this: a man called Haman, who is another official, a higher ranking official than Mordecai within the palace, almost secondary to the king kind of level, prime minister kind of thing, I guess you'd say, so Boris level, Bozza. Basically, this guy, Haman, was not a good guy. He was one of those people that loved his position, loved the power, loved people to be beneath him, and he wanted people to bow to him all the time, and then most people did. Now, Mordecai, who was a Jew, he did not want to bow to Haman. I hope I'm saying it right, it's Haman, Harman, I'm not entirely sure, but if you're that bothered about it, then message me. So yeah, Haman basically loved power, and Mordecai refused to bow down to this guy because he believed that you should only be bowing down to God, which is good, and we should be the same. And unfortunately for Mordecai, Haman took quite an offence at this and really went pretty overboard with his response. Because Mordecai would not bow down when Haman passed by him, Haman essentially decided that he hated Mordecai that much that he would kill all the Jews within the Persian Empire. So a pretty serious response there, considering it's just somebody who's just not bowed down. But he was that infuriated that he wanted to kill every Jew because Mordecai was a Jew. And so it was a pretty tough time for Mordecai, as you can imagine, and the Jewish people. And because Haman was second in command almost to the Persian Empire at the time, he went to the king and asked for his permission and butted up the words a little bit, so that essentially the king agreed to killing off the Jewish people, because Haman claimed many different things about what the Jews were doing, but essentially that he wouldn't be bowed down and worshipped. And so this order was given out to kill all the Jews in the kingdom, and Mordecai obviously was mortified, terrified, and many other fine words. But it was horrendous, as you can probably imagine. His people, his loved ones, were all going to be killed because of something that he had essentially done. He wouldn't bow down to worship this guy when he passed by. And it must have been such a horrendous time for him. But he still didn't give in and bow down to Haman. I'm going to read a verse now, which says, so this is in the book of Esther in the Old Testament, for those of you who would like to look it up, how he felt Mordecai after hearing of the plan that Haman had set into events to kill all the Jews. And it says this in Esther 4. It says, when Mordecai learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on burlap and ashes, and went out into the city, crying with a loud and bitter wail. He went as far as the gate of the palace, for no one was allowed to enter the palace gate while wearing clothes of mourning. And then it goes on, and I'll explain that in a second, but just imagine that. He tore his clothes up, he was so sad, and wore burlap, which is just sackcloth, basically, and ashes. He was so upset. I mean, who can blame him? And so obviously, Mordecai immediately thinks, I've got to do something about this. I've got to try and get this thing overturned, this decision overturned. And so obviously he thinks of Esther, who was the queen. And he passes a message on to get Esther and to try and pass them on about what's happening and what Haman is trying to do to the Jews and the Jewish people. Now, Esther obviously was also a Jew too, but she hadn't made it aware within the palace into the king because she was afraid of what might happen. And so Mordecai sent this message saying, you need to do something. You need to go to the king. You need to get this overturned, otherwise all our people are going to die. And it says further on in Esther 4, of the back and forth between Mordecai and Esther. And you can see earlier on that Esther is kind of very, well, clearly, because she thought she was going to die, and you can understand it a little bit, but she was very, very scared about going to the king because she didn't want to risk her own life. And Mordecai really has to encourage her and remind her of who's in charge at the end of the day in God, and that she should do her part in saving the Jews. And this is sort of what the reply that Mordecai sent to her in a message. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. Now you may remember that verse in particular from when Beth spoke, at such a time as this. And it's quite a severe message that Mordecai sends to Esther, which, it sounds a little harsh, but, the severity of the situation, something had to be done immediately, and Mordecai needed to remind and encourage Esther of what she needed to do in this scenario, and remind, as it says here, that, relief for the Jews will arise from some other place if Esther didn't do anything. And that's true, because God will have, if Esther hadn't have done something, God would have done something through somebody else. And so Mordecai reminded her to do what was right. And so as the story goes, if you remember what Beth said, Esther goes to the king and gets the decision overturned, and all the Jews are saved. And everyone goes, woohoo! Except for Haman, of course, and we'll get to him in a moment. But what I want to focus on is Mordecai, and the fact that all of this came about because he did what he knew to be right and not bow down to somebody that wasn't God. And this threatened himself, Esther, and his entire Jewish family and people group in the entire region because of one decision he made. And sometimes we're going to make decisions that are going to be very difficult, that will affect us, that will affect our loved ones and everybody around us. And sometimes it's going to be really difficult for us to stand and say, well, I think this is right. And if everybody else is saying it's wrong, it's going to be really, really tough. But if you believe and you know by God that it is right, you should do it anyway. Now, I also kind of want to point out how Mordecai was not one of the up the front probably people that you hear in Esther. Obviously, Esther is the main character here that we'll hear a lot about, and how she saved the people because she went to the king and made that big step of faith out. But without Mordecai doing his part in not bowing down and then going and sending the messages to Esther to encourage her to do the right thing and help to save the Jewish people, none of what Esther did would have happened. And sometimes we forget, we see people on the stage doing the preaching, maybe you think of me, or Johnny on a Sunday at Renew, or big people like Bill Johnson, or in the secular, not Christian world, you think of Boris Johnson, or anybody famous. All you think of is, oh, look at them on the stage, aren't they fantastic? Look at what they do, they're so gifted, they're talented, and they are. But there are and have been people behind them that will have encouraged them, reminded them, and helped them along the way, who won't be people that will have been seen or recognised maybe. And I kind of want to just remind us ourselves that Mordecai was one of those people. He helped and reminded and encouraged Esther to do the right thing at the right time, which ultimately brought in an incredible thing. And so maybe you feel like you're one of the people, you feel like, I just don't think I'm ever going to be doing one of those things where I'm standing at the front. But maybe you're one of those people who's going to encourage and help those people that are at the front, or maybe will one day be in the front. And that doesn't make you any less important or any less vital in God's plans. In fact, you could be as important, if not more, because without the people like you maybe encouraging and helping other people behind the scenes, those people would never go on to perhaps do the great things that they will or have done. Just like here with Mordecai and Esther. And so to finish, guys, I just want to kind of make 2 points about how we can apply this, what we've learned about Mordecai, to ourselves. And the first one is, and I've already kind of mentioned it, is that we should stand up for when we believe we should be standing for God, or standing for a situation or a person in which God has told us to do something. And just like Mordecai didn't bow down to Haman and went and told Esther and encouraged Esther and reminded Esther of what she should do in that season, in that moment, to help other people. And so we should be like that. We should not be afraid to go against the grain, to go against the general consensus, and stand for what we know is right by God. And especially if it's encouraging another person. And that leads on to my other point, is that we should be encouragers and reminders. One, encouraging people to go on in their life with God, and pushing them through into what you know is gifted in them, what they know they should be doing for God. But also reminding them when they're struggling, when they're hitting a point where they fear for the future, where they fear, like Esther probably did, where she was fearful about telling the king that she was Jew and to save the Jews because of what might happen. Fear of the unknown. That we should remind those people of how good God is and how he will step in and how he will use you and use them. And so those are the two things, is be an encourager and stand for what is right at the right time. And then to finish, I'm going to show you a little bit of how this kind of story goes on further with Mordecai. And it's quite funny, really, with him and Haman. The story goes a bit further on. Haman has a plot to actually kill Mordecai himself after getting even more annoyed when Esther goes and asks the king to stop the plot to kill the Jews. And this ends up in basically Haman being made by the king. And it's quite a tricky little way of going. If you read Esther, it's really funny. I won't go into the whole thing now. But basically, Haman is made to lead Mordecai on horseback around the city like a king almost. He's given the king's robe, it's said, and a king horse with the king's emblem on its head. And Haman is made to walk Mordecai around the city square in front of all the people, which is the ultimate humiliation for Haman, really. After wanting to kill Mordecai, the king shows his gratitude to Mordecai by making Haman walking around the square. It's just really funny. So if you get a chance to read that, that is in Esther 6, and it is a really, really funny part for me. And then ultimately, Haman gets what's coming to him. The king finds out what he's been doing, trying to plot to kill the Jews and use the king to get his own way. And Haman does end up getting killed by the king of Persia. So it's not a great end for him. But Mordecai gets thanked, gets praised by the king, and it all turns out great for him. So that's it really, guys. So that's the end of tonight's little message about Mordecai. If you want to know more about him, it is in from the book of Esther in the Old Testament. But for now, that is it. So I hope you enjoyed me, and I'll see you later.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Another great talk. And of course, to the legendary Beth DeSoyza and her biscuits. We hope you're all alright. We will see you next week for another Surge Online. If you need us, reach out. You know where we are. Bye.